Welcome back. This is the second part of a three-parter on Visio Professional 2013 and data linking to Microsoft Excel. Primary focus of this video in this part is to look at the stencils and data graphics. So what we'll be doing here is setting up our stencil and data graphics so that we are able to view the objects and the data in a way which is most effective for communicating that visually to an audience. So you can see on the left I have a few of the stencils open that are just default within Visio 2013 Pro. I've got the rack mounted servers and the servers. I'm going to go ahead and close the rack mounted because I think I'm just going to work with the servers today. Now what we're going to end up doing is we're going to create our own stencil. Because we don't necessarily want all of these. We want to be able to have our own stencils. So first thing we need to do though before we do that is to set up our data graphics. So this is just hang with me here because this does get a little kind of going back and forth on some things. It's a little confusing. But once we do it, I think you'll see that it kind of makes sense. So we know in our data based on our build sheet that we have www servers, so we have some web servers, and then the rest we're just going to assume are application servers. So over here we have web server and application server. Now, in order to get this data up into your workspace, it's really easy. You click on the stencil you want, you click on the data you want, and then you just drag it up. Now, I've already done this once before, so my data graphic is already set up, but I'm going to sort of go back through and walk you through what that looks like and how we got there. So I want one stencil just up here, and don't worry about what it looks like or location on the page right now. Right now we're really just going to focus on getting the data graphic set up. So we need one web server, and let's click down here on an application server, and we're going to pull up. So we've got an application server. So we're going to click on data graphic, and we're going to edit the data graphic. Now you can do create new data graphic if you want, but usually you can just do edit data graphic even if you haven't already set it up, which I have again in this case. You can do edit data graphic, and it's going to bring up this dialog. So what this is each line here is going to represent. In fact, let's just delete all of these, and we'll just we'll do new. So you're going to do data field. You're going to choose a data field, and you'll see you have all your data fields here based on your data down at the bottom. So let's start with host name. I'm going to do host name on top, and how do you want to display it? Well, let's display it as text. And this is where data graphics is really pretty powerful. I'm not going to get into it in detail today, but data graphics does let you use some visual tools to represent data. You can color by value. You have different values. You can have them be different colors. You have data bars, icon set. So let's say you wanted to show capacity increasing or decreasing of a storage drive, right? And so you could start looking at some formulas of saying, well, if the number is greater than 1 terabyte, then it's gone up, or if it's less than 1 terabyte, it's gone down. Whatever. It's outside the scope of what we're doing here, just showing that it's pretty powerful. So when you select text, you have several options here as well. A lot of them are, again, they're kind of to me they're a little overly graphic for what I want to do. I really just want text. So the two that give you just plain text are your text callout and your heading 2. Text callout defaults to giving you a label. I don't want a label. I think it takes up too much space when you're trying to consolidate your space and be concise on what you're showing. So I use heading 2. Now heading 2 defaults with this border type. I'm going to go ahead and leave it for this first one. You can see I'd already done that before over here where I had the host name with with an underline. That's this border type having bottom. It's basically an underline. On the other fields, I'm not going to have a border type. I'll say none. So we'll go ahead and do 12-point font for here. We're going to leave the border type. We're not going to do any horizontal or vertical offset because we're just going to leave it centered. If you do a vertical or a horizontal offset, you can push the text over to the left or to the right. I've noticed sometimes if you push it to the left, it'll push it up against the icon itself, and that starts to look a little messy. And I haven't quite figured out how to move that over. I can't do it from the shape data, and I'll explain that in a minute. So I'm going to say OK. So I'm going to take, and then so we're going to new item. Next, we're going to do the IP address. So we do IP. We're going to display it as text. Let's do it as a 10. We want none. And then we're going to have we're going to do new item. We're going to do the operating system. We're going to do text and none, and 10, and then we're going to do, I think we said we're going to do comments. So let's do comments to give us just sort of a brief description. Also 10, and you know what, let's see what it looks like with this one with the border, because maybe that way we have, yeah, let's see what it looks like. All right, so apply. So you see that puts the server here, it gives us this, and then putting the border at the bottom of the last one sort of just breaks that off. So let's try that. Let's see what that looks like. You see the default position here, and you can see how it correlates. It's putting it over to the far right of the stencil object, and then it's lining everything up in the middle, and it's just stacking them based on our order. And if you wanted to change this order, you could click, and then you could click the up arrow, down arrow, and that would move them. Where this really comes in handy is let's say you didn't want an icon for your object, you just wanted a box. Well, you could go over and do your standard workflow shapes. Just get you a square, drag the square in here, and then you could tell it to center that data, and center middle, and it's going to put it right on top of your shape. And that works pretty well when you just want a box with the data inside of it, but you want the box to encapsulate it. In this case, I want the I want the shape because, and I like these shapes when I'm doing servers because they represent the role that the server has. It's pretty easy to just look at this and see this globe and recognize it as a web server. See this application screen and recognize it as an application server. Once you start using them pretty regularly, all of the icons make quite a bit of sense. So you see over here you have a file server, mail server, database server. I typically use the web server, the application server, and the database server the most. Okay, so we've set up our data graphic the way we like it, and you'll notice that it changed it for everything because right now all of our shapes are using that data graphic. And we still have our original data graphic here, so that I had created before. So we can either say, all right, this shape I want this data graphic, or I want this data graphic. All right, so creating our stencils, we want to more shapes, and we're going to do new stencil, and since we're in the United States, we're going to do US units. And it says quick drop, or drop quick shapes here. One thing to keep in mind is if you just drag this and drop it over there, for whatever reason, it moves it. So if I go drag this over here, it actually drops this over, and this is no longer here. For the purposes of what we're doing, that's fine. If you find that you've done a few of these and then you realize you need to create the stencil and you drag it over, it's kind of a bummer that it does that. So you can actually right click on this and do copy, and right click over here and do paste, and it'll do the same thing. Since the only purpose of us having these up here is to create these stencils, I'm going to go ahead and just drag them over here. It's fine. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename them. So I'm going to say web server. and then we're going to say app server. So you see we have stencil 1, it has a little save icon, wants us to save it, and we do want to save it, so we're going to hit save. And it wants to put it in my shapes or whatever, but we're going to put it, I want to keep it all together, so I'm going to put it in the Visio training folder that we're doing here. And it's for project 1. Project 1 is the name of our project, quote unquote. We're going to call it project 1. Project 1 stencil 1. Sure, why not? The asterisk means that it is currently editable. If you close your Visio and open your Visio back up, you won't have an asterisk, and you also won't be able to edit your stencil. The stencil will be read-only. You'll have to right-click it and tell it to edit in order to do that. Okay, so now for the last step in this part of the video, we're going to go ahead and add our objects to our workspace. So we know these top 4 servers are web servers. So we're going to, I click the top one, shift, click the bottom one. I'm going to click web server so that it knows which stencil I want to use. And now I'm going to drag these up, and you'll see it cascades these down. Now, as far as I know, there's no real good way to change how it adds the servers. You can, once you've added them, if you feel comfortable with it, you can actually, if you have everything selected, you can use the align buttons or the position buttons. Since I'm trying to fit them inside of my background boxes, I just do them manually. But again, do whatever's comfortable for you. That's just what I do. Okay, so there's our web servers. Pretty easy, and you can see it added all 4. It adds their own individual data. Pretty simple. And you can see down here now there is an icon to indicate that this data is linked. So the rest of these, we know they're application servers, so we're going to click, shift, click the rest, click application server, drag these on, and just kind of, you may even want to start a little bit higher someplace because it's going to cascade down, and then just start sort of dragging these out and figuring out how you want to make them look. So we're just going to kind of drag these into position. And again, you can see how I'm able to just highlight the objects, and I don't have to worry about moving my boxes around. Of course, I don't have anything up in the user's box. Typically I'd have maybe some sort of icon to represent users. Let's see, what's one that has users? Computers and monitors, maybe? Let's just use a PC. Okay, PC, here's our users. Doesn't matter, we're not linking this, just having it for the sake of having something in the user's box. So as you can see, this doesn't do anything with connections. You're still going to have to drag your connections and link them however you want to do that. I'm not really going to focus on that in this particular training session. Really just focused on the data linking component. So that's your stencils, that's data graphics. Make sure you've saved everything, and we'll go on to the next part, which will be changing up and updating the data.